Nice to see you all. I'm going to call this meeting to order. Our first order of business is approval of the minutes from March 11th. We did see those, right, Hester? You had sent those out, I believe.
Yes.
Yeah. Anybody have any comments or changes to those? No. Okay, then can I get a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
A second? Okay, thank you. And all in favor?
Aye.
All right, I guess we have to do a verbal. Do we have to do a verbal count when we're online like this?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Aye.
Okay, Lucy?
Aye.
Okay, and Hester?
Yes.
Okay. First, and all in the room are saying aye, so thank you for that. And then the treasurer's report, Catherine, I believe you sent that out yesterday.
Yes, it's a very simple report for this month. We just had 7 awards that went out to HCT. I do have a note at the bottom that if anybody is really checking these, the opening HCT balance will not match last month because it was adjusted to reflect a return check. But I made a note of that at the bottom in case anyone is looking again. And I'm also keeping track of how much we are giving out to CMLP. That's also in a note on the bottom. And finally, the trustees of donations have written a check to us for the silent fund. It's for $26,000 or $27,000, and that will get deposited soon, but that has come in. So that's all I have on that. Anyone have any questions on the treasurer's report?
No.
Then can I go get a motion to approve the treasurer's report?
Approve. I approve the treasurer's report.
And all in favor?
Yes.
Yes, all right, well, thank you. All right, moving on. We had talked about in the past, you know, the fact that when the intake role is reaching out on behalf of of a requester to another organization, that we might want to consider having a release of information for that. So I drafted something really simple yesterday. There's nothing that I'm wedded to in this, but I just wanted to have something for us to respond to. So Hester, I'm guessing that in your work, you are looking at things like this.
I do know about these. What I realize I'm wondering as you speak, Jill, these probably need to be signed. I mean, so how is that going to happen? I mean, is we always in the presence of the person?
Never.
I recognize that.
Yeah.
Yeah, Lucy, you're shaking your head no, like that's not happening.
Well, the only reason we don't get together with these people, 99% of the people we support, I never see in person. So I don't know. And a lot of them don't have computers, so they can't email it back to us. So I'm not sure how it exactly would work. And asking them to go to the townhouse would be a real inconvenience for many of them who don't drive or are incapacitated in some way. So I'm not sure. It's a lovely idea, but I don't know how we would do it. So I'm over to you to.
Well, Bonnie and the Council on Aging could facilitate with some people. I would think the Council on Aging would be seeing a lot of people.
They don't go to everybody's house because there are housebound people who they counsel. So it's not like everybody drops by COA. That would be one thing. And they also,
not everyone, but some.
No, but I think there is a point that we could be checking in with them about how they manage it, because my guess is that in best practices, they are getting permission to speak on somebody's behalf and to, it's not necessarily a HIPAA release, but it's something, perhaps, I think it's worth exploring with them to see if they have an equivalent and how they manage it, at least for that category of requesters.
I'll be talking to Bonnie this month, so I can find that out.
Thank you.
So
Yeah.
maybe you could ask Bonnie whether a verbal approval is adequate for them, because if it's adequate for them, it's probably adequate for us. And this is probably sort of a less dangerous situation than it is in a hospital where you're really worried about sharing somebody's medical information, where it has to be signed. A verbal doesn't do it. But maybe this is different. And then we just have to document that we had received permission.
Right, that might make sense. I mean, and yeah, and I think financial information and medical information are slightly different in terms of sensitivity, but not necessarily. You know, there could be some really personal information you don't want exposed. So I think it's, yeah, we should follow up with the experts and see what they say, but you know, at least this gets the conversation started, and if we could add a verbal acknowledgement, then perhaps that, at least it acknowledges that we have asked and we have the permission.
Right. I mean, that's certainly better than nothing.
Yeah. Okay,
Can I ask a
so did you,
question?
sure.
Sorry, I raised my hand, but I'm not sure it shows up in the.
Oh, it's hard, it's kind of blurring in, but yes,
Okay.
like,
I just had a couple questions. One was what other organizations do. So for the Council on Aging, I wonder how they handle this question. And
mhm.
the other is if this is a one-time situation, because I don't feel like every time they reach out for help, they're going to have to do this, right? It's just once.
That's how I envisioned it, but
So,
I don't know, I mean, in a in a medical setting, you have to get permission, like I can release, I approve my information being released to you, Elizabeth. I mean, it's not a blanket release it to anybody, it's a release to X. So I don't know whether this would need to be released to the dentist, released to the car repair shop, whatever, or whether it can be open. Released to anybody seems kind of, why would anybody sign that?
so that sentence that I wrote is specifically vague. Between vendors and representatives, so for financial debt.
Right, so that might cover it, yeah.
So one thing, in a practical way, this happens. I very often get an email or a call from COA, rarely to never from Bonnie, but COA will say, oh, you know, this person is in need in this respect. And I hope you can help, and Community Chest is helping, and you know, we're all pooling together, and St. Vincent de Paul and other funders. And so it's a kind of an informal, we're all in this together to help this big situation that's too big for one to handle. And so that's kind of an informal permission to talk to each other, which is what we do to try to balance, to make sure we can cover a bill, for example, a big bill. We've had maybe 10 huge bills since I've been involved in this, maybe more, where we've all talked to each other about, you know, 300, can you do 2,500? And maybe Hugh Cargill Trust, I'll try to ask if we can do 500. And so that situation arises, and COA knows we're doing that, and they encourage it because it's the only way to solve the problem.
so I want to give a little perspective, because while I was chair, it's probably been a couple of years now. I did get one phone call from someone who said, I didn't know that talking to COA meant that now Hugh Cargill was going to know about me. And so I think actually when we get a request, for example, from COA, when you get a request, that isn't necessarily an automatic, I'm okay with my information being shared. So that's the reason I asked the question of how many times, excuse me, you would be asking someone for permission, because if it's once, then there's a task of getting applicants sort of that we see regularly up to, you know, sort of get their documentation in order. And after that, it's going to be only when we have a new person. I can't stop saying we, sorry. I miss you guys a lot.
I think that this sheet does need to have something about the other caregivers in town that we would be in contact with. And then I think that individuals should be calling us, not they should be contacting us, as opposed to the Council on Aging asking, if the Council on Aging is asking us, they should be encouraging that person to call us.
So
Well,
it should be
That's
the individual, it should be a direct request, not a third party request,
Well,
second party.
The Council on Aging should ask them to contact us, and they could also say they're gonna speak to us. And then Lucy, you could be working together behind the scenes, but we really have to encourage people to contact us, I think.
they do, but it also is preceded by one of the social workers saying, we've just had so-and-so in the office and this is what's going on, and they'll be in touch with you. And there are a couple that are too shy, but they want us to reach out to them, which I've done, and they're very grateful, and we've been able to help. So it's sort of a conversation with the social workers at COA too. I spend time with them.
I have a question. Shannon, how hard would it be to run this by, a legal person?
I would have to ask permission from someone like the deputy town manager or something to be able to reach out to town council, but I could see if we'd need to do that, but I also thought that Nicole, when she was here, offered to directly fill out the form if she was in person with someone at the COA and send it in directly. So that's sort of different, I think, than now what we're discussing. I know Bonnie said she is not able to do that, but Nicole said that, she has a couple staff people that she works with and she would be able to do that.
I guess, my legal question is, do we need to have, signed or verbal permission from the applicant in order to speak to anybody else about that person's situation?
Yeah, I guess it's worth asking, because then if we don't need it, then.
And then we can let it go, right?
Yeah,
But if it covers some bases,
Yeah, I think what I'll do is speak with Chris Carmody first. He's our risk and compliance manager, so I think he'll at least be able to give us a good opinion before we have to go to council.
that'd be great. So if
Yeah.
you can follow up with Chris and Catherine, if you can, with Bonnie, that would be helpful.
Yeah,
Okay. All right, thank you. I think, again, I just
Thank
want to
you.
get the conversation started, and I think this is, useful to think about, and good to know that it sounds like it's only happened once in your experience, Elizabeth, that somebody was concerned about not following up, but that's enough to say that this is something to think about, in my mind. Okay, great. So I'm moving on to recruitment of a new member. I know we all had some names on the list that had been shared with us from the town manager's office. I know that the one person I followed up with, I hadn't seen or heard from her in years, and her email bounced back to me, and I did find out she moved out of town years ago. So I don't know how valid the list is. Did anybody have any luck?
I had said earlier that I had called, and I used the name Julia Lynch. Well, I had emailed her and then followed up and left a phone message and have not heard back from either of those. And she still could call me back, but I have not. Wouldn't.
I reached out to the two men. One responded immediately, but said, I already have been on that committee for years, and plus I'm too old to do it now. And the other one I never heard from, although I did send a second email a couple weeks later.
Right. Yeah, my contact was Patricia McAlpine. Go on. Kristen, I think, did you have somebody you were checking in with?
Julie Lynch is a good friend of mine, but she was iffy. It's just she was not sure. So I don't think she's
I put a K down, that's why.
So
Okay.
I did invite two people who, one was able to make last week, but didn't know that it had been rescheduled, and neither could make this week, but I did say that I would send them the link to the recording because they'd like to see a meeting to get a better idea. They're both wonderful, but at the same time, they have pretty intense jobs and kids in school, which isn't to say that they don't have the time, but that may I wouldn't be surprised if that came up as a reason for it being more than they can add to their plate. And one is a man. That would be great.
Yay.
So we'll see. I'll keep you posted. I'm just in communication with them, so I'll send them this week's recording.
Great. I know I've asked at, like the chair's breakfast or other communications with, Andrew Fountain, I guess is doing it, to try to keep us posted on other potential new applicants, and maybe we need to scan the list of people who have submitted volunteer interest cards to see if there's anything that maybe sometimes we're a second choice on, you know, some of these committee lists.
I think they would be on that list that you had.
Okay.
I
So,
had a question about that, though. I know it's, you know, we don't want to particularly encourage folks to join a committee if they have expressed a different preference. So for example, if Hugh Cargill isn't even a checked box. But if the conversation begins with, you know, we know you're interested in the Board of Health, and you didn't mention an interest in Hugh Cargill. And we certainly don't want to discourage you from joining the Board of Health. But there's this committee called Hugh Cargill, and this is what we do, because sometimes I remember when I first completed my green card, I wouldn't have even known what Hugh Cargill was. And sometimes that just, so I feel like there's more to mine in that list without it being inappropriate, even if it's just to inform them of what this committee does.
So when I came on, I was not on a list and I didn't have a green card, but Susan Eckel got in touch with me and she said, I want you to do this. And I learned about it and I said, okay. And I think if we reach out to people we know who may not have filled out green cards, because not everybody even knows about green cards, but people who would be, you know, have the time, interest in what our mission, you know, we might find in our friend community somebody who would be really good. And I think we should all go after our friends and see who would be appropriate. I really honestly do, because it's going to be hard to find the right person. And so, you know, and as Elizabeth said, a lot of people don't even know what Hugh Cargill is. They've never heard of it. So they wouldn't even, you know, go to the townhouse and fill out a card.
That's how I ended up on the committee. Ray Andrews just talked to me about it one day. I had served on others and I had a green card, but I had never checked that box. And as soon as he described what it was, I was very interested. So, yeah, I agree. I mean, the people that I've talked to are not, they don't have green cards filled out at the town. But even those that do, I feel like there's more education about the mission of this committee that would generate interest.
did try that with one friend. She totally ignored my message to her. So, so Shannon, how would we be able to dig deeper into the list?
Yeah, that's a little trickier, I would say, because, you know, we have a database for everyone who fills out a volunteer card. That would give you a lot of data, including the people who may have moved out of town 5 years ago type situations. So I tend to think that trying to reach out to your own network first is probably going to be a little bit easier than going through that list, but we could give it to you, but it's gonna give you just, yeah, a ton of names, and you're not gonna necessarily know what the person's skill set is, if they still live here, if they're still interested in volunteering.
But I think that I still think that would be a worthy endeavor, because we can just be very blunt about, if this is what the committee is, these are specific skills we're looking for, if there are any, and here are the core requirements. I mean, 80% of those people will probably not email us back, but it's possible. If there's a list of people who are interested in getting involved in the town, I think it's well worth, you know, putting that out there.
Wendy, I see you have your hand
Yeah.
raised.
You know, the select board actually was talking about this, and there's a lot of old data in that database. And I would suggest if you're going to go after that database, only take those that actually have a current date of submission because there was a conversion. And so I think those are the ones that are probably submitted in the last 2 years. But that would be my advice if you're going to go down that path. But the select board is sort of taking this one on because I think that database is old and we need to sort of shore it up. But it's just my advice. Thanks.
Thank you.
I think we could probably. The database, yeah, as Wendy mentions, is a little old and clunky. I feel like we would be able to get you an Excel. And what we do is just filter out, the people that don't have a date of submission then. And yeah, and then hopefully those are the people who in the most recent years have submitted it rather than. Someone from 5 years ago.
Okay, that would be helpful. If you
Yeah.
could help us do that, that would be great. And I think that we need to continue having conversations about how to manage it. And then, in the meantime, we have, another month until Lucy's term expires. And, be great if we didn't have to lose Lucy right at that moment. But I think that the term limits law don't allow you necessarily.
No, Wendy can continue to, or Wendy,
Lucy.
yeah, Lucy can continue to serve until her seat is filled. That's included in,
In the
in
bylaws.
an APP.
Okay. And how would you feel about that, Lucy, if necessary?
Well, I enjoy doing it, so there's no problem with me doing it going forward. I really enjoy it. I like to do it. So I'm one of those people that I hope we find someone who will really enjoy doing it. It's the passion for the mission, and it's actually the hands-on passion for the mission. So I'm happy to stay until somebody takes my place.
That is really great to hear. Thank you.
Hester and I have had a conversation about just, what to do, being concerned about this.
Yeah.
And we were thinking of, another alternative would maybe be splitting up the job somehow, but having that natural split where it doesn't become burdensome and you don't lose the information at some point, and a handoff becomes a complicated, scenario. So, we didn't, in our brief discussion about it, did not come up with a simple, consistent way of doing it. So.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so to be continued also.
Yeah, I'll get
Okay.
that list to you soon.
Okay. All right, thank you. So the next items were, we just need to, review and approve the property, the annual appeal and, oh, no. The annual repeal letter, did that go out?
Yeah, it should have gone out, and yesterday I actually received a handful of checks and I thought, oh, people must have started receiving their letters in the mail.
That's great.
So,
Not yet.
I didn't get mine.
okay, so yesterday I had like 5 to 7 Hugh Cargill checks. And that hasn't happened recently, so I figured,
Yeah.
Maybe some people have started receiving it,
The
but
ones with post office boxes.
yeah, right.
Oh, that's great.
So yeah, that was set to go out when I spoke with Concord Printing. They said Thursday or Friday last week, so
Great.
Well, thank you so much for getting that out.
yeah.
Appreciate that. That's great. And then, Kristen, you have been so kind to update the outreach material.
Yeah.
And then that is set for going to annual meeting? Is that, well, that was one of the places it was gonna be, right?
Yeah.
The trifold.
Yeah, that went in that
It
annual
should have been-
appeal
yeah.
envelope too.
Okay. Excellent.
So we'll see that this week.
Great.
Yeah,
Exciting. All right, progress. Well, thank you both for that. And then there was the property tax relief,
One of the applicants last month is not a trustee of the estate, so is not eligible for.
okay.
I can
Yeah,
give
I
you
was
the name
holding,
later.
I was holding on that, I know which
But
one
I
it
don't,
was.
there weren't any new this month. Okay.
okay.
Yeah, and then we have the FY 26 application, which nothing has changed on it beyond, I'm just going to contact the assessors and get the new numbers for the senior means tested to update on that. And then what I did update, along with that was the letter that typically goes out with the application that says that we will be increasing the quarterly payment to $400.
Right, thank you for doing that. So we have that letter updated and then the eligibility thing. And they were both, you did get the numbers updated on this.
I know I have to
You still have to
do
do
that,
that.
yeah,
Okay,
but I just wanted to make sure there weren't gonna be any other changes to general formatting wording.
did anybody have any comments on it, any changes? It's pretty consistent, standard stuff.
Yeah, so I'm gonna get that out like tomorrow then.
Shannon has a lot on her plate right now. Did somebody, Lucy, were you gonna ask something?
No, I just said I thought they both looked just fine. Well,
Yes, thank you. Same thing, okay. All right, and then the last item is just to make sure that we're all available for our next meeting, which is, I believe, May 13th. Yes, May 13th at 9.
Yes,
Everybody available?
Yep.
Okay, great, so that's our next meeting. All right. That's all I had on this agenda. Was there anything else before we go into executive session? Okay,
All right.
then
I move that we adjourn to executive session for the purpose of discussing individuals or families seeking assistance, the disclosure of which would be a violation of privacy.
okay, all in favor?
I.
Aye. Okay, thank you.